So now I'm going to be chairing a panel, How Can Breakthroughs in Tech Truly Benefit Humanity? So I'm going to ask my three panelists who are in the room to come and join me on stage. Sorry for whoever has to sit closest to me. You can back away. Do you want to take your seats, ladies? I'm really thrilled to be joined in this discussion today by Felicity. I'll let them sit down. Yeah, anywhere you would like. So online we have joining us B. Longworth for Government Affairs at EMEA at NVIDIA. Hi B, how are you? Good, I can hear you. And also Jen Rodfold, Head of Sustainability, Digital Ethics and Social Impact Consulting at Software Stereo. Hi Jen, hope you're doing well. That's
Hi,
great. And then in the room I have with me, they've all decided to move over there. That's probably
social distancing.
That's probably very sensible. Good choice, ladies. I also have joined with me Julie Dawson, Chief Policy and Regulatory Officer at Yoti, Felicity Birch, Director of the Centre for Data Ethics and Innovation, and Janet Valentine, Director of Health Data and Digital Policy at the ABPI. I'm thrilled to be chairing this discussion. I'm going to move over here though, so you can all see who's behind me. Apologies. So we're really talking this afternoon about how breakthroughs in tech can really benefit humanity. And we talked a little bit about the technologies. Obviously, we've focused a lot on AI, but we just don't want to focus on AI today. We want to talk about and think through about the different technologies that are coming down the line and taking a cue from our previous panel. You know, it's not about overhyping or hyping. You guys look so far away. Hello. But how do we talk about and think about the technologies themselves, what the future could look like if we really harness science and technology, and if it lives up to our highest expectations, and how do we get this right, and the impact that it could have on people in their everyday lives. So we're really looking at kind of, obviously, the technologies that we have today, but also I'm hoping in our discussion a little bit into the future as well. How far into the future we want to go is really up to our panel as well. So I've got a few questions that I'm going to kick off with, but please encourage you all, those of you in the room, as we discuss, there'll be a bit of time for questions. And then if you're online as well, my wonderful team will be checking online for questions as well. So I'm going to kick off, and maybe B, if I could start with you, and then perhaps I'll go around each of the panelists to get your views on a similar question. And it's a broad one, but I think it's a good place to start B, can you perhaps share with us what you think the potential is of tech, and I'm going to say future tech and innovation as well, to benefit humanity now and in the long term? And what stands out for you, if we get this right? Obviously, we're at the Digital Ethics Summit. We're talking about how do we get this right. So what stands out for you in terms of the potential and any technologies themselves?
Well, let me say first, thanks so much, Sue, for the invitation. Wish I could be there with you in the room, but glad to have the chance to present to you virtually and cover this important topic. And I'm really glad that this topic is kind of the centerpiece for the afternoon's discussion, because if we're going to get this right, the balance between realizing the benefits of technology while making sure that it's set within an ethical framework, we need to be hopeful, we need to be optimistic, and we need to take the time to talk about the best case scenario and why we're spending all of this time trying to get this incredibly complex piece of work done in terms of a regulatory and a standards framework. What's the point of it all? So it's a fantastic topic. When I think about being hopeful about technology, I kind of tend to go back to science fiction. I'm not a technologist by training, I have to admit. And so thinking about depictions of technology in fiction, and particularly authors like William Gibson, who have really hopeful stories about technology, where technology is the hero. It seems almost kind of unfashionable at the moment to be optimistic, to talk about the best case scenario. And of course, we need to have a balanced discussion, but we can't lose sight of that optimism. And we have some pretty daunting challenges that we're facing at the minute, and perhaps none more daunting than climate change. And so I wanted to give a couple of examples today of ways that technology, like artificial intelligence, but also things like high performance computing and the metaverse, are being applied in order to address this incredibly complex challenge, not only the climate crisis, but also the energy transition. And I think it's fair to say that there are a lot of different ways that this technology can have an impact. Obviously, the technology itself needs to be efficient. We need to achieve a twin transition in European language so that the technology itself isn't out of step with the objectives of sustainability, which are ultimately kind of the point. We have the opportunity to more accurately model and forecast climate change in order to understand it better and be better prepared for it. We can use this technology to make existing systems like energy and transportation more efficient. And then we can also accelerate the development and integration of renewable energy sources into the energy grid. And coming back to one of those points, the idea of modeling and forecasting, at NVIDIA, one of the programs that we're working on, I'm most excited about, is something that we call Earth-2. And so Earth-2 is it's a great problem for NVIDIA because we get very excited about really hard challenges. Climate scientists have estimated that if we were to continue using current numerical techniques to predict and model very complex systems like storms and clouds, we would need 100 million times more compute power than exists today. So it seems clear that we can't go on the way we are. We have to innovate aggressively in order to be able to tackle this problem. And that's exactly what Earth-2 is trying to do. It's trying to bring together a number of different technologies, including artificial intelligence, high performance computing, and the metaverse, in order to create a high fidelity, real-time digital twin of the Earth. And that's important because not only climate scientists need this information to understand what's likely to happen, but other groups need it as well. Policymakers, for example, if they had access to a system that allows them to quickly run lots of different simulations of the impact of the policies they're talking about, that's going to enable them to be more effective and to kind of war game those policies in a really effective way. So I think that's a great example of what's happening right now. Earth-2's in the fairly early stages, so this is absolutely kind of a future-gazing piece of technology, and we're surprisingly optimistic, I guess, about the chances that we have to achieve this highly complex problem. We think that by applying these different technologies, we can already, in the relatively near term, achieve 1 million times speed up in order to start tackling some of those complex problems. So I guess that's my key message today. Let's have a balanced discussion, but make sure in that discussion we include the best case scenario and that we stay hopeful.
No, it's brilliant, Bea. Thank you for kicking it off. Absolutely, what we want to focus on in this session is that kind of foresight. What's coming down. I'm being optimistic, absolutely. But how do we get this right? I'm going to go to the room before I come to you, Jen. Felicity, maybe I'll kick you off with the same question. Particular technologies themselves, or where do you see the opportunity here, and how do we get it right?
Yeah, and thank you, Sue. And I was so excited to be part of this particular session, because I do think that talking about the opportunities for technology is a key part of talking about how we achieve ethical outcomes for technology. And the Centre for Data Ethics and Innovation very much exists. It's our mission to enable trustworthy innovation. And for me, that really has two parts to it. And one is focusing on solutions that matter to people. And the second is not to shy away from the ethical risks, but actually lean into them and tackle them while you're innovating. And that's one of the reasons actually that the focus of a lot of our work, in particular our Responsible Data Access Programme, is looking at what are positive use cases, what are some of the big challenges that we want to tackle, but the technology and the governance isn't there yet to let us do that. So two of the things that we're working on at the moment that I'm very excited about, and of course you know about the Privacy Enhancing Technologies Challenge, because we launched it with you back in
the summer, wasn't it?
Yeah, a very, very busy week in June. But essentially, we have two challenges that we're running, also in partnership with the US. looking at how you tackle global financial fraud. So it's a multi-trillion dollar problem, and it's one where if banks were better able to share data between each other, you might be able to identify where fraudulent activity is happening, but banks are really reluctant to do that for all sorts of actually really sensible reasons, including the privacy of their customers, but also things like intellectual property protection. So if you had the right technologies in place, you might then be able to sort of share that data better and tackle some of these issues. And then the second aspect of this challenge is looking at pandemic preparedness. And there again, you are looking at what is often very sensitive personal data about people's health. But well, we all know the economic and personal impact of pandemics and other health scares. So really, what we are trying to do there is say we know that there are big problems that data sharing could help with. So sort of stepping in and sort of thinking about how you build the technology. But it's not just about how you build the technology. The reason that it's the CDI running this is because we are interested in how you build that technology well. And we are also really delighted to be partnering with the ICO on this, and they're involved to make sure that this is going to be compliant with regulations as well. And for me, I think this is a really good example of two use cases that should make a really big difference to people. But making sure that we are leaning into the ethical risks and the ethical concerns that people might have, and doing that right from the get-go.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something we don't shy away from here at the summit, of leaning into those issues, and perhaps we'll touch a few onto those in terms of, and I have Luciano in the front row looking at me, that kind of ethical foresight as well about what's coming down the line. How do we get it right as well? But Jen, I'd love to come to you. Lovely to see you, and we're really thrilled that Software Stereo are part of the summit again, so thank you for the support. But you were nodding away during Bea and Felicity, so I'd love your view on this in terms of the role of tech to really benefit humanity, particularly as we move forward in innovation, and any technologies or innovations that really stand out for you, perhaps, as we look to kind of what's over the horizon and how do we move forward.
Thanks, Sue. Yes, it's always hard to follow two great intros like that, because I can only agree really, really strongly with the opportunity and the enthusiasm. But perhaps like to just reinforce the message of the panel today, that we do need to be optimistic. And I think too often in the world of digital ethics, we focus on the risk mitigation and alignment to standards, which is really important. But we've just done some research in Software Stereo across a number of fronts in a number of industries, and what keeps coming up again and again is that one of the potential blockers to technological adoption by normal people, and that's service users in financial services as well as in the public sector, is that they don't yet understand what the trade-off is for them, or what they get out of it, more importantly. So we do need to be better at kind of expressing this benefit, not just to society and as businesses and across our industry, but almost narrate the partnership and the shared value creation that we're all invested in these kinds of programs. So we can talk a bit more about that. And I think, sharing some of Felicity's enthusiasm for the role that technology and data can play to help people. We are working on some exciting programs to improve data sharing and access to data, so that organizations in the public sector, utilities, and financial services can better serve vulnerable customers. And this is born out of regulatory drivers like the consumer duty, and just social pressures like the cost of living crisis, and general awareness that organizations have an opportunity, a tremendous opportunity to improve digital inclusion and financial inclusion in some really, really big ways if they can access the right data. But that goes back to this challenge of making sure that people who might be socioeconomically disadvantaged, digitally excluded, or otherwise categorized as vulnerable understand that there is a benefit for them. So I guess we're looking at it as the result of this research in terms of kind of three things. We have to continue to do better on designing digital services and data-driven approaches for service users. So asking them what they need. We still don't see enough conversation with users, user engagement, and human-centered design. And I think the digital ethics agenda really lends itself quite well to that, because if we do this well, we should be seeking actively to understand users' values, beliefs, and expectations, and designing technology around that. So tying ourselves to the human-centered design movement from an ethics perspective is a great opportunity. Engaging users throughout the design of digital technologies and data-driven programs of any kind is really important. So not just at the beginning in the design phase, but getting feedback throughout the life cycle. And then describing the benefit, like we're all saying. So again, across all of our research and our experience with organizations, we just keep hearing that technology service users are really quite open to using more technology, giving more data, if they understand that there's a benefit for them. Usually, interestingly, as individuals, you know, in addition to understanding societal benefit, but if we can really get good at describing the benefit to individual service users, I think that we'll be able to advance some of these business concerns, but also these big ambitions we have in the industry to drive better social outcomes and environmental outcomes.
Apologies. Thank you, Jen. Julie, I'd love to come to you. You're nodding away there, people, but understanding the trade-offs and the benefits as well. Apologies. Can you follow up perhaps for us on that?
Thank you, and again, 3 hard acts. So within this room, just looking around, everybody is over the age of 18. Yet if you looked online, 30% of people online today are under the age of 18. And there was a classic phrase by Nelson Mandela, a society is judged by how it treats its children. So there's obviously tremendous opportunities in many different areas for you young people online, be that in EdTech, be that young people with disabilities, etc. However, the flip side is, how do we protect those young people so they can actually thrive online? So one of the things that I think is incumbent on us all, and many of us here will have either younger, you know, family members or connections, where this is really important for us as individuals. And I think taking part in a number of the working groups with the World Economic Forum's Global Coalition on Digital Safety, and looking at all of the raft of regulations coming on stream, be it the Digital Services Act, Digital Markets Act, in California with the Age Appropriate Design Code, in Australia with their e-safety, coming through in Singapore with their online safety bills. Wherever we get to in the UK after our Age Appropriate Design Code and the online safety bill, in the next year or so, this is really on the map. And if you took the parallel with the motor vehicle, it took 100 years for us to go from having the motor vehicle driving along to compulsory seat belts and child car seats, and then things like speed cameras that might catch us up here and there for the right reasons, all of those guardrails. And yet we're now in a position, you know, 20, 30 years on, where we haven't really quite nailed all of these as yet in the online world. And there's been some really high-profile cases recently. There was a coroner's case not long ago in North London, and many of these different cases around the world have highlighted exactly that element. Picking up on the previous speaker, you know, the fraud landscape is something we all saw during COVID. Eye-watering figures in the UK, the Economic Crime Commission, similarly in the US. The dollars in the sort of high 80, 90 billion in the US, 27 billion or so in the UK. Those are huge figures on the fraud perspective. On the safeguarding, that 30% of users online. So what are the things that we can do there to flip that dialogue and to look at how young people can thrive? There's been some classic examples in the UK, the work of the ICO with their ICO sandbox. There's been work in the EU with the EU Consent Project, looking at interoperability across a whole different set of ranges of age assurance. And absolutely, we need to look at how that can work with people of all ages. There was some excellent work by UNICEF looking at how do you, building on the element of explain things simply, not just for an adult, but a parent and a child. But classically, if you look at the reading age of one of our broadsheets, it's about age 12. So should we be writing everything, be it for regulators, be it for non-engineers, and be it for the consumers of all ages, that actually are linguistically age and comprehension appropriate for the mass of our audience? So absolutely, I think that there are things that can help. But looking at the metaverse, we have an imperative to get things right in a short period, where we haven't really cracked it in Web 2.0, and yet we know through the extraordinary amounts of data that would be exchanged through the physical interface that there are heightened both benefits and both risks for more vulnerable populations. So one of the things that we've looked at is specifically areas around age assurance, and specifically methods that are AI-based, that can be inclusive, not reliant on documents. But again, you need there to look at the ethical underpinnings, look at the bias levels, and back to Luciana's point, having that independently validated, the bias independently reviewed, and the whole efficacy of a range of methods by a platform. There's not just going to be one method that they will deploy. They might have a whole range of different methods running side by side, and a regulator and regulators around the world's cooperation is needed to look at the entirety of methods put in place and that transparency reporting. So lots for us to progress on there.
No, absolutely. And as you were all talking, I was thinking the word that kept coming to my mind was convergence, and not just, as you say, Julian, all the different methods or different approaches or different standards and different legislation we may need to face going forward if we look to the future. But also that there's not going to be one technology, right? There's going to be different technologies. So how do we get that right as well? But Janet, before we leap into that, and I'm sure many other questions, as I'm currently not having a coughing fit, which is good. Love your view on this. We're really thrilled that you're with us and here from the ABPI. Love your view on kind of opportunities you're seeing for tech, particularly innovations in tech, to really benefit humanity, and what stands out for you.
So just to, first of all, thank you for the invitation today. And just to contextualise biomedical research within the ethics framework, the two have been intimately linked for decades.
Yes, indeed.
And decades. And whole frameworks and systems have been built up around research ethics. And it doesn't just apply to us as living beings, but our tissues, and also in preclinical research, the ethics applies to ethical approaches around animals. And I think possibly the pharmaceutical industry is probably the most regulated industry in the world. Advances in biomedical research lately have really steamed ahead, and technologies have moved quickly with them. And quite interestingly, I think we're used to medicines, thinking of medicines as small molecules, pills that we pop. And yet in the last 6 years, we've gone from 10% of therapies being cell and gene therapies to now 17%. And that is reliant on advanced technologies. And certainly digital technologies like machine learning and AI are just integral in target discovery, validation, product development, diagnosis, prognosis, stratification of patients, et cetera, for the whole pipeline of product development. And what we're seeing now is this blurring between traditional, what we think of as pharmaceutical industry, and health technology industry, where you're seeing pharmaceutical companies have either their own digital departments or work in partnership. And integral to all of this is, of course, access to health data. And that's vital for the training and validation of AI algorithms, but in many, many other areas. And certainly issues are coming to the fore when we're talking about health data that is de-identified, non-consented health data that's used in research. So we're hearing more and more dialogue, not just at ethics research committees, but amongst the public about use of health data and use of AI in research.
In a way you haven't seen before. Do you think that's really ramped up?
Most definitely. Last summer, people might have been aware of a very large debate going on about the use of GP records for research and planning that hasn't come to the fore for some years. previously there was an initiative around care.data where it came again. So we haven't quite got this right. We haven't made it clear what the benefits are. We've spoken today about risks, how everyone's very happy to talk about risks, but I think it falls to us all to talk about the advantages and what happens if we don't proceed with using technology, with using the resources that enable us to do this, and what the consequences are if we don't go ahead. It's all risk-benefit. All of this is about risk-benefit, so we need to talk about the benefits as well as the risks.
I suppose, Jen, that comes back to what you were saying in terms of public benefit, but understanding or getting that conversation right. I suppose the blunt question is, we're not getting that conversation right now? And if so, if we're not getting the conversation right, particularly because I'm just thinking like the speed of innovation is quicker now than I have seen for a very long time. This is only going to get faster, right? So how do we make sure that we get this conversation right now so that we can move at pace, but we also don't get it wrong for people, right?
Yeah, I think that's a really hard balance to strike. But I mean, just to illustrate kind of numerically or quantitatively some of the challenge we're seeing. So we did a survey of 1,000 UK citizens on their levels of trust in public sector digital services. And only 46% believe that data is used to deliver public services fairly. So that's in itself an issue, because we want to be making better use of data to improve services and make better public policy decisions. But when it comes to things like AI and algorithms, the problem gets worse. And I think we can probably point to where that comes from. We're not telling a good story in the media, and things like mutant algorithms still being in people's minds really don't help us. But I think we saw something around 30% only believing that decisions made by algorithms are in the public's best interest or service users' best interest. And that points not to a problem. I guess, yes, things have gone wrong and very publicly. But again, we're not telling the good stories. We're not really educating people about what algorithms are. We use confusing language. So there's a lot to do on digital literacy, digital ethics literacy. And so I think, to your question, there's a long game in terms of the education, the literacy piece, starting at school age, engaging with media better. And then the shorter game is just to get better in our design of digital services in user engagement and human-centered design. I think there's still a feeling in our sector that slows things down, but it doesn't slow things down if it helps us get to the right answer more quickly and reduces the risk of these things not being anticipated in big projects before they get off the ground.
Yeah. Julie, I know you wanted to come in on that.
Yeah, so one of the things that we've been grappling with is how to do research in a way that is helpful for people that don't have any knowledge about a topic. So you probably all remember the days before we used to tap our Oyster card or card.
Oh, the good old days.
Good old days. And if someone had said to you then, would you be happy to tap and transfer £100 to a retailer in 5 years' time? Most of us would have laughed at them. And so when you're doing research, that's a real challenge. If you're asking someone about a technology they've never come across, so we actually looked at doing some experiential research, asking people before and after, giving some information and letting people try a technology and getting their views before and after using an experiential research tool that works with gamification. It's by a little tiny company called Playverto that had worked with Lego, for example, alongside the Sustainable Development Goals. And in about a 5-minute piece, it was designed at young people 9 to 14. We could get what their views were before about this specific topic, which was using facial age estimation. We could let them have a go, and we could get their views afterwards. And it was very interesting seeing that from young people and seeing that from adults. And we see very different results when in a lab we have actual live groups of people undertaking something versus taking 15 families cold that have never come across a technology. So I think more ways that we can get actual live experiential research could perhaps help with some of those traditional attitudes type surveys that have been undertaken.
Yeah. Felicity, did you want to come in?
Yeah, just wanted to talk about a bit of a live example of how we're doing that at CDI, because I do recognise a lot of the challenges that have been raised, in our own public attitudes research as well shows that the general public can see a range of benefits from sharing their data, but certainly are concerned about sort of how that data is used. And in particular, one of the key risks that our research around bias has shown is where data and algorithms are used that make decisions about people. That's one of the areas that people are really anxious about.
That kind of impact their everyday lives.
Exactly. But at the same time, there's a huge opportunity for using more data and algorithms in public services, both to deliver outcomes to people more quickly and also to reduce the cost of delivering those public services. So one of the things that we've been doing is building a standard to help the public sector to report on how they are using algorithms and what meaningful transparency looks like, because one of the barriers to being transparent is actually I don't know how to be transparent well, and we did do first of all we did a bit of a polling with the general public and sort of got the information that wanted all of the information about the algorithm. I'm overstating this case, but wanted us to share as sort of much as possible as we could. And so we mocked something up and took it to focus groups that were representative of the general public, and very quickly could see that actually that wasn't really meaningfully transparent because it was quite difficult to understand. So instead sort of developed something that had two layers of information, one that was quite straightforward and one that if you do want to sort of dig into it more, if you're more specialist, if you're a journalist, that you might dig into, and it's there and available. And we did engage with the general public through focus groups. We engaged with civil society, and I think that sort of designing in for sort of how people want to use that makes it much more meaningfully transparent. And there's a really great phrase in the disability community talking about design for disability, that sort of nothing about us without us, and I think that's a useful principle to consider here. And actually, the next step as well with the standard is at the moment it is being trialled and tested and rolled out across areas in the public sector, and we're getting feedback from them about how easy it is to use. And some of the really encouraging conversations that we've had have been that it's helped them have better conversations internally about AI governance more generally. But also, lots of sort of small things for us to kind of continue to improve about how organisations can report. And I think this sort of approach to sort of openness in design and trying to improve things, obviously in parts of industry that's quite a common approach, but I think being open about how we're doing this for me is quite central to that sort of building trust as well. And I would just say actually if members either in the room or online are interested themselves in sort of developing your approach to algorithmic transparency, although this has been designed with the public sector in mind, I think it can be a useful starting point for the private sector. It's currently on GitHub, but you can find it via the CDI blog. And I'd be very interested to hear from Tech UK members on sort of what they think, and hopefully it's a useful tool and starting point.
Yeah, well, we could definitely share that information with folk as well. And Janet, just it's kind of ethics by design, or baking in an ethics and principles. Is that an approach that your sector and your industry is taking, or is there a different approach that you're taking to kind of address the ethical questions that, as you say, that are coming more to the fold now than they ever were, because this is only going to increase as well, right, in terms of as medicine and the innovation continues at pace?
So I'm thinking of an example of my previous role, where I was director of the Clinical Practice Research Data Link, which is a large dedicated health data research service for industry, for academics, and for regulators. And some of the work that they're doing is around creating synthetic data.
Oh, yeah.
So it's taking the CPRD acronym for the organisation, CPRD's primary care data, and creating a completely artificial data set. But the key is that the complex clinical relationships within the data exactly mirror that of the ground truth real data.
Yeah.
Now, that is a very, very tricky, complex thing to do, something I've clearly had nothing to do with. But the team have done a brilliant job in doing that. Now, the wonderful thing about creating something like that is not just to circumvent any IG concerns, information governance concerns, but it means you can start to develop new methods of testing things. So we know in clinical trials there are certain groups that are not included, pregnant women, obvious one, older people tend to be excluded. So what they are doing now is creating synthetic models of those populations so they can look at how a trial would impact those missing individuals. So we can use this is not a particular AI example here, but we can use technologies to address inequalities, diversity, all of that side of thing in medical research. Very important.
Yeah, and fill those gaps in
Fill the gaps.
data sets that may exist, right? But then I suppose what is the knock-on effect, or what are the does that mean use of synthetic data raises more questions or opens up questions that we perhaps have never had to think about before?
Yes, because one of the real concerns about clinical trials on which all our medicines are based, the results of those, is they're actually done, I mean, I don't know if people in the room are familiar with this, but actually done on a really tightly defined cohort of people who can't usually have some other condition because they have to see the effect of the intervention without anything blurring that. So when that comes to translating into the real world, when we actually take those medications, yes, of course we know they're safe because they've been tested, and yes, we know they have an impact, but what is it really like if you are not part of that cohort who was tested? And so that's why this sort of work, in silico models for trials, that kind of work is very, very important.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating area, and for someone that's taken quite a lot of pills in the last 48 hours, if they could use synthetic data to cure whatever I've got, that would be really helpful. Just a common cold, folks, don't worry. It's nothing too bad. We are very, very quickly running out of time, and I knew this would happen. It's such a fascinating discussion, and I hope you'll agree, a fascinating panel of experts as well. So perhaps let's round this off in terms of, and apologies that we've run out of time. I wanted to talk a little bit about where the focus needs to be, particularly as we're looking kind of over the horizon, looking into the future. Is there one area, one issue that we really need to focus on and move on to ensure the breakthroughs in innovation and tech really benefit humanity, particularly as I think we're all agreed, right? We're all really optimistic and super, super positive about the opportunities. But is there one area or one issue that we really need to keep our eye on, either from an ethical point of view or a responsible point of view, or just that we really need to get right as we move forward? Julie, can I maybe start with you, and then I'll come around and end with you, B, if that's okay?
Sure. One thing that always strikes me looking at Tech UK's membership is there's a large percentage of small SMEs. And one of the things that we found challenging at the beginning was how to build our own ethical framework as a small organisation when we were just 5 people 8 years ago. And we set off quite early on with an external ethics group across human rights, consumer rights, last mile tech, accessibility, online harms, and then subsequently have built an internal one. But we sin from lots of other SMEs. That's really quite hard to do.
Yeah.
How to build that know-how. We were actually pre-pandemic, we ran a meetup just on that.
I remember that.
We had a huge number of companies. And I think that's a big challenge still. How do we help the SME and scaling up community to address this?
And
from a
to learn
capacity?
from others and learn. We had a session before, Julie might have caught it, on learning from mistakes, but learning what works and what doesn't work as well.
Yeah, and sandboxing I think can help, but yeah, that capacity building.
That's really fascinating. We'll definitely take that away. Janet, one area, one issue you think we need to focus on?
Well, one area in my sector that we absolutely have to focus on, and it's not just in my sector, I can put on a hat when I was at Innovate UK, whatever hat you want to put on, if you're looking at from a digital health perspective or a biomedical perspective, we've got to be able to access these fantastic health data resources here in the UK securely. In England, we've got a strategy, a new Data Saves Lives strategy. We're going to be implementing secure data environments. The government will be doing that. It falls to all of us to make sure that we make it clear what our needs are as industries, how we can access that data safely, but how we must be able to do the same functions and perform the same services as we now do. I would say that that's the red line. but we need to explain that clearly. So
Yeah.
I think that is very close and is something that is quite urgent for us to do.
That's a brilliant call to action. Thank you, Janet. Felicity, you only allowed one.
I know that's tough, but I will focus on one where we can collaborate with people who are in the room and listening today, because I think there is a real opportunity to showcase aspirational ethics and a sort of sense of what businesses can do, what the public sector can do when it comes to innovation. And you may have heard the minister speaking this morning about the collaboration between Tech UK and CDI on a portfolio of industry case studies on assurance techniques, and we've done this because we think it's really important for other organisations to be able to see what best practice looks like, to not have to come up with everything from first principles. And I would say actually to people in the room that if you do have sort of assurance processes that you're proud of, that you think others could learn from and want to demonstrate that you are leading the way, it's a real opportunity to do that. So please do submit your case studies and engage with the work that we're doing to try and make the ethics a bit easier.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I would echo that, of course. Jen, over to you. One thing or one area.
Well, let's assume generously that we're going to get the guardrails right, because I think they're, for my hypothesis to work anyway, and we're all working on that. I think I'll be a broken record here and just say again that we need to co-create these solutions with users so we can legitimately express the benefits back towards those users and to society, and tell that story both broadly in the media and elsewhere, but also directly in those services with users.
Yeah, brilliant message, Jen, and not a broken record at all, because we have to get that right. And then last word to you, to be, if I may, one area, one issue we need to focus on.
I think I absolutely echo the importance of effective communication out to end users, to policymakers, not only about these best case scenarios, what we can achieve, the impact that technology can have, but also that we're making progress. And the subtitle of this event is Staying the Course. And this process of trying to get the governance framework right can feel exhausting. And I think it's really important to communicate that progress is being made, and that in some cases the technology itself is being applied to solve some of its own problems, or to at least start addressing them. So for example, federated learning in the healthcare space to enable data sharing while protecting privacy, explainable AI, which we've touched on, to enable AI audit and AI assurance. So that would be my key takeaway. Let's keep sharing that message that the challenge is huge, it's complex, but we are making progress and we will get there.
Thank you, Bea, and a brilliant message to end on, a fascinating discussion. So Bea Longworth from NVIDIA, Jen Rodfold from Sophrosteria, Janet Valentine from the ABPI, Julie Dawson from Yoti, and Felicity Birch from the Centre for Data Ethics and Innovation. Thank you so much. Can we thank them in the very normal way? Thank you, ladies. Wonderful panel. That was amazing, and we could have gone on and on, but we're not allowed to because we're moving now into our next session. Next up is our afternoon breakout sessions that are going to kick off at 3:10, which is like now. So apologies for that. One session we're going to be focusing on tech industry's role in respecting human rights, with that's going to be powered and supported by BT. And the other is in keeping people safe in the metaverse. So again, really focusing on that kind of innovation. So online attendees can navigate to the relevant sessions by going to the agenda tab on the left hand of your screen. For those in person, here we go. For those joining the human rights session, stay where you are. That is going to be in here. For those that want to join the metaverse, or the metaverse session, I don't believe it's being held in the metaverse. Not yet. Anyway, that's coming. I'll see people going. You should head over to the reception area for rooms 3 and 4, and we will see you. And you're all off. We'll see you back here at 10 past for our next session at 4 o'clock. Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks, guys.